So I think we're probably just about ready to get going. We might have a few more people that are trickling in, or we are expecting a few more people to trickle in, but I think we might as well make a start on the day. So good afternoon from the UK. Good morning to others who might be joining elsewhere. My name is Britta Wyatt. I'm a principal consultant with Auxentia Limited, which is a consulting and training company based out of Oxford in the UK. I'm going to be facilitating this session today, but the real stars are our speakers, our panelists, who you can see on screen. I'll introduce them in just a moment. But before we do that, just wanted to say a few words to set the scene and the context for why we are having this conversation today about digital shape. So why digital shape? Auxentia has been involved in a program called the Aspect Network for the last, I want to say, 3-4 years now. And this is a program that is bringing together many universities across the UK and internationally. I think we have over 45 now that are involved in this program. And these universities are looking at what good practice looks like for commercialization in the social sciences, humanities, and arts. The acronym we're using there is SHAPE, because we say it's social sciences, humanities, and arts for people and the economy. So this network's been going for 3-4 years, many years, 5 years, I don't know, a lot of years now. And we've got two people whose universities are part of that program as well here on the call, Bill and Michaela. And one of the things that has arisen from the insights coming out of that network, looking at good practice and shape commercialization, is an awareness that often digital channels end up being one way that we can help to commercialize shape research. That might be using digital technology to amplify or enhance a analog shape innovation, or it might be actually digitizing shape research and turning that into a product and service. So we've seen that that can be a common way to help create wider impact from shape research. We've also seen that it can be a bit challenging, particularly when perhaps the people developing the innovations might not be the technology people themselves that need to do the digitization, or might not have an awareness of how to engage through digital channels. So we thought it might be interesting to bring a few folks around the table today who have experience of doing that. We are going to be hearing from Bill Short from the University of Exeter in just a moment. He's the founder and CEO of Senseful AI and also a lecturer in classics at the University of Exeter. Senseful AI being a spin-out that's commercializing digital research tool that he developed, looking originally at conceptual relationships in text, but seeing opportunities for that to be applied to all sorts of other uses. So Bill's going to be telling us a little bit about his experience of this commercialization from the academic perspective. After that, we're going to do a panel discussion where Michaela Turner from Edinburgh Innovations will be joining us. Michaela has a background in digital and creative informatics, business development. She currently helps spin-outs from Edinburgh and is also particularly interested in that intersection between AI and ethics and arts and humanities. And then finally, my colleague here, Sahand. Sahand is a consultant with Auxentia and our digital strategy lead. He has a background also in this space of tech and science, not necessarily shape per se, but he is very interested, particularly in how AI and ethics come together with shape digital innovations. So I had told our speakers I'd let them introduce themselves, but I've just gone ahead and introduced them on their behalf. So unless they want to say anything else, I'll let them tell you more about themselves later when we get to the panel. So with that, some last housekeeping points. We are with you today for about 45 minutes. We're aiming to go until 3:45 UK time. We're going to start with 10 minutes from Bill, then a panel discussion, and we would encourage you to use the chat function to ask questions to the panelists or to comment throughout. You're very welcome to interact with each other as well during the session. Unless I see any questions coming through the chat right now, I think what we will do then is turn it over to you, Bill. And I'll just ask that the rest of the panelists, we just turn our cameras off for the moment, and we'll come back on after Bill's talk in about 10 minutes.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, Britta, and thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. Great to be talking about shape research commercialization. Yeah, I'll try to give some background a little bit about the story of Senseful AI and my journey with research commercialization. Um, I'll just hit the main point since you've given me the time limit of 10 minutes. Obviously, I could talk at great length about what has been a really incredible and fascinating and yeah, personally very significant journey into commercialization. So I am a lecturer at the University of Exeter. I am a lecturer in the Department of Classics, Ancient History, Religion, and Theology. My specialization is in Latin literature. And I'll talk just a little bit about my research because that obviously provided the impetus, the motivation, and really the practical context for Sensible AI as a spin-out company. So I'm a Latinist by training. I'm interested very specifically in metaphorical aspects of language. So how authors across all different types of genres and in all different contexts speak metaphorically about various aspects of their experience. And actually, I try to reconstruct what I would call large scale metaphors as a way of looking at Roman culture more broadly speaking. So what characterizes Roman culture as kind of an idiosyncratic, self-contained, unique way of viewing the world as a worldview, getting at that through the kind of specialized metaphorical ways that authors talk about concepts. And that means really looking at large bodies of text. So primarily in Latin, but also in Greek to develop a kind of comparative perspective. And what I'm interested in is the way metaphors uh, as as a relationship between concepts. So not specifically between words. I'm looking at how kind of whole lexical clusters might relate to each other, whole conceptual fields relate to each other, and how those are manifested across large bodies of texts. So just as a very quick example, you could think of a metaphor like, okay, the war was a huge war was burning. That's a line from Tacitus in Latin. Flagrabat ingens bellum. Okay, a huge war was burning. Now, a question in my research might be well, is this just an isolated example? Is this unique to Tacitus, or is this a metaphorical way of expressing, of talking about war that characterizes Latin as a whole? Right? So I want to find out where and how does this connection, this figurative connection between war and fire, manifest itself across the entire Latin corpus, independent in some sense of the particular words that is expressed. Now, you might not be surprised that Latin has a very rich vocabulary, both of burning and of war. Okay? And it turns out that if I were to just look for two-word pairings, okay, of the whole vocabulary of burning and the whole vocabulary of war, I would have to do something like 255 discrete searches of the whole body of Latin text. Now, that is a huge bottleneck for the kind of research that I want to conduct. And I to kind of mitigate this, I developed a research tool for myself that that can search text, but again, but at the level of the relationship between those two concepts. So not at the specific lexical level, but at the conceptual level, and to find any example across all of Latin literature where this metaphor might in some form be manifest. And now it turns out that that kind of searching, that kind of way of looking at text through a lot of conversations seemed like it would be valuable to a lot of different people. And Sensible AI was formed as a vehicle for exploring commercial applications of this basic technology. And we've gone through we've gone through quite a journey with that original intention. I'll just mention some main things. I've never run a business before. I have zero commercial experience. I will just admit that. In the first instance, part of that commercialization journey was to give me some skills and to bring on help for thinking about how to commercialize that. And there are two basic issues I would say that we faced. One is just a question of upscaling the technology to a kind of enterprise level. I wrote this, I knew some Python. I wrote this in Python for myself, but it gets the job done for me. It's not a tool that could be deployed in industry by any stretch of the imagination. The second question is, well, what are the markets for a tool built on top of this technology, right? An enterprise grade tool built on top of this technology. It was through the Set Squared partnership, of which the University of Exeter is a member, that we were able to do some of that, bring on some team members to help with that thinking, get some initial funding to help with that thinking. We've been very, very lucky to have won grants both from the university, from research councils, and indeed from a regional venture capital firm down here in the Southwest, which have allowed us to kind of drive development forward and drive exploration forward, including an Innovate UK grant, a 50,000 Innovate UK grant to explore an entirely different application of this core technology in the creative industries. And that's sort of the stage that we're at now, is trying to determine our market strategy, so to speak, and to raise funds to execute on that. So actually, I think I can probably just finish up there. I think I'm within my allotted time, so that might be a good spot to finish up.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I said you're in fact early, so well done. Thank you. Thank you for telling us. So I think that's really, really helpful background and context for all of us, just to be able to hear that example of one academic who saw an opportunity in their research to develop a tool, and then saw an opportunity to do something wider with that tool. So with that, I would like to, we've got the rest of our panelists here, Michaela and Sahand, and Bill, and we're now going to start a bit of a Q&A and discussion. So again, just a reminder for those on the call, if you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to pop them in the chat at any point, and we will come to those questions as we go along. You can also interact with each other. Hopefully the chat's working properly and you can interact with each other as well. So right. So we heard the story from Bill. Michaela, want to hear from you too as well in a minute in terms of your context and experience from the TTO side. But before we do that, I think it's probably worth just setting a foundation here for what we mean when we're talking about digital and digital shape. So this kind of phrase, digital shape, it's not something that necessarily exists. It's something we said, it seems like it makes sense to pair the two together. What is digital shape? What might it look like? Bill has just told us one story. And maybe just if I could start with you, Michaela, just sharing maybe a few more examples of the ways in which you've seen digital and shape coming together, and how you might define that.
Of course. So I previously was part of the Creative Clusters program, which was funded by Arts Humanities Research Council. And my project that I worked in there was the business development around bringing data with design together. So at the University of Edinburgh, we have a big thing called the Edinburgh City Deal, which is all about bringing data and digitalization into different aspects. So we have a college called Arts, Humanities and Social Science, and that was all around bringing all the data and technology and the concept of data as well into the college. and also into the creative sector. So that was quite a big challenge. A lot of people don't realize they're sitting on so much data and they just wouldn't call it data because it's something that they potentially think a computer does rather than a human. So that was something that was really interesting and eye-opening to go on that journey with a lot of people in sectors that have a lot of data but don't really know how to use it. So then transforming that over to academics as well. So obviously, where would you be without all your data in academia? That's what you're building on. That's what you're getting your results from. That's where you build your hypothesis, especially within shape as well, whereas a lot of people wouldn't expect it. So we've been mainly using digital to sort of scale up programs and help people get access to them in a wider range because you're one person sitting by yourself trying to do an intervention. It's really hard to get a huge amount of impact. So using digital helps scale, but also it allows you to bring in external people and get access and help with usability as well, which has been a big factor.
Thank you, Michaela. So we have the example of Bill creating a digital product, but then we also have this example of using digital to kind of scale up programs and taking advantage of data as well and how we use that. Thank you. So what do we mean by digital shape? Another question. How do you know if digital is the right channel for shape commercialization? Is there any kind of obvious flags, or are there kind of any scenarios where you may or may not opt to go digital? Because sometimes we maybe think it's this golden ticket. That's maybe the wrong expression, but it's kind of this, we should go digital. This is the way to solve this, is the way to get this out there. It may or may not be. Any thoughts on that? How do you know if digital is what you actually need to bring something forward through commercialization? And I'll open that up to anybody who wants to jump in there.
I'm happy to start because we always used to get programs and applications for funding saying, I want an app. And a lot of people just wanted an app for the sake of an app. So we now sort of work backwards with people and we go through the sort of lean business model canvas as well to help people understand what they're working on, why they're working on, and what they're working on it for. And so that's understanding, especially commercialization. A lot of the work we do is helping whoever it is at the start. It could be an academic, it could be professional services, it could be an external, to go through and understand what their product or service is for, who they're solving the problem for, and then allowing them to understand how best to do that. So it's not coming with a solution, it's coming with the problem you're trying to solve first. So we always step back from any platform or any data before we even move forward of having those conversations. So less people are coming to us about apps, so that's good. But it was a constant issue many moons ago, but it's fixing itself a lot better nowadays.
Thanks, Michaela. I'm seeing a few comments come in, specifically questions for Bill, which kind of lines up with one of our next topics we thought might be interesting to discuss, which is about the how. How do we actually do this digital shape commercialization? So Bill, I think we might just take a couple of these questions because you're going to be talking about how you did it from your perspective. But we have one question it's showing up as JR in my chat, which says, Bill, could you tell us more about how you got to the point where you are now and who did you involve?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Janine. Yeah, so we have been very lucky so that through the Set Squared partnership, there's a program, it's called the Executives into Business program, and they will actually fund a seasoned business executive to spend, I think it's up to 6 months, something like that, in the company. So, we're a startup, we have very little funding, and we need to take advantage of somebody who does have, business experience. And we found somebody. This was somebody who somebody in Exeter Innovation recommended them to us. We had a couple of initial conversations. Her name is Margaret Manning, and she's come on and actually has stayed with the company past the Executives into Business program. But that it was at a critical time when, as I said, I have really zero experience of commercialization. Never even really imagined myself kind of pursuing this route, and having Margaret is somebody who has grown multiple tech businesses, She knows the industries that we were interested in targeting. She knows how to build a company from the ground up. She knows how to market, how to get investment. So bringing in that kind of know-how from the outside has been absolutely transformative for us. Just because as an academic founder, I don't, I can learn some things, but I'm going to struggle.
Yeah.
And to make impact fast and to be able to execute quickly and smartly, we needed that kind of outside experience, and we were lucky that we found somebody who we've had great synergy with, and who was able to kind of drop in and bring those skills with her in order to perform.
I think that's what's interesting about that point to me, is that sometimes when we think digital shape and we think, who do we need to involve? The first thing we think of is, well, we got to get somebody not technological in to develop the thing, because we assume that that's not the realm of the academic, the shape academic. We need to pair them with somebody from STEM or get in a subcontractor to develop this thing for enterprise. But what you're kind of pointing out there is it's equally important to have the right business kind of mind and support for yourself to bring this in. And it sounds like there's a follow-up question there. Well, there's two questions. I'm going to jump ahead to one of them, which is from Haley. She wanted to know how you split your time between academia and the company, which is a very good question. Sounds like you've got a great team supporting you, but I'd be interested to hear from you on that. And then Michaela, maybe you can jump in afterwards if you've got any examples of how kind of team building has worked in digital shape.
I mean, the team is absolutely critical, because there's no way I could do everything on my own. There's no way I would even know how to do everything on my own. And how do I split time between academia and the company? Very poorly, I would say. I mean, it's, let's be honest, 2 full-time jobs that I'm running at the same time. And so there's always going to be some tension around that. How can I get the time that I need, that the company deserves, while also, still running, fulfilling all my responsibilities academic. It's a struggle. It's an ongoing, it's a conversation that we're having all the time. I think my personal aim is more and more to move into the company. I find that, just to step back for a second, the whole endeavor started during the pandemic, in a way, as a way to, a realization that actually there might be something in my research that could, make a meaningful impact on people's lives, and I find that really compelling. So I think the transition is going to be more and more into the company, but it's an ongoing negotiation. Let's just call it.
Yeah. Michaela, I wondered if you had any other reflections on that, in terms of how we can support academics, or how you've seen that happen, where you're trying to build teams or build support, or maybe it doesn't even end up being a spin out. Maybe it ends up being something else. Curious to hear your reflections as well.
So we've seen quite a lot within the shape area of people actually collaborating with externals. So bringing in external companies who are potentially already up and running, who are already active in the market, would like to. It's not a licensing deal, so it's more that they'll jointly create IP together, and then that would be a spin out that they'd work on together. And that's something we hadn't really seen in any other college. So that's been really interesting to see. But I'm not going to lie, as Bill said, it's hard. It's really hard, and that's one of the first things I say to everyone when I meet them. It's not going to be lovely and cool and sexy as it is in the TV shows. It's really hard work. There's going to be a lot of downs, but there'll also be ups, but there are probably more downs to start off with. So it's going through that, but knowing that we're here to support. So it's making sure your commercialization team, that you work with them as well, make the most of them. The university is almost like your safe nest, where you can try things out before you go off by yourself. And if possible, make sure that you try like the Art Catalyst as well, where they can get buyout time for you to actually work on your program full time for part of your time, which is really useful. It's not something that's been there before. And I think it will make a big difference going forward. It's obviously very competitive, but it's definitely a great thing to look into. We normally have the thing where academics do when they spin out as well. It's normally 80% either in the university or in the company, and then 20% either other way. That's the best model that we've found to date to help people actually progress.
Thanks, Michaela. We'll put a bit more. We'll mention the Art Catalyst. Michaela mentioned that program. We'll come back to that again at the end if anyone's interested to know more about that specific program in the UK. But while we're talking about this and how we can support academics, we do have a question that's come in possibly for you, Michaela, which is how tech transfer practitioners can bridge that gap between SHAPE researchers who lack software development experience, but also want something to be commercialized digitally. And I wondered if you'd seen any kind of support programs or just any kind of tips or anything like that. And Sahand, I might ask you to kind of reflect on that one afterwards as well. Any thoughts on how we can bring together kind of STEM and SHAPE?
I think the main thing would be looking for funding. Don't try and do it all yourself. Ask questions, ask for support. So we have impact acceleration funds from many different research councils at the university. So whenever we're working with an academic, we'll try and build sort of a pathway of how they're going to get from the initial idea to where they want to be and the steps along the way. A part of that may be bringing in people to help with the software element if they want to go digital. If there's a platform they need, it's making sure we build that into grants going forward. And if it's a research grant, making sure that they have the option to commercialize it afterwards as well. So you know for a fact that like Wellcome Trust, the vast majority of their funding cannot be commercialized. They want it to be open. So it's having that conversation up front. So think about it. I work with people many moons, like years and years before they spin out. So it's helping them build that pathway to say this is what they want to do longer term. So we build the foundations below to make sure they can do that in the future. So it's ask for help and support early on. I think is the key thing.
That's a really good point. I might come back to that in just a moment. I wanted to give Sahand the chance to come in here where we're talking about this idea of people with STEM skills, maybe partnering with people with SHAPE skills. It's something that, at least in the Aspect program, we've talked about a lot. Is there an opportunity there? And you've mentioned kind of collaboration as well, Michaela. Sahand, I know you've mentioned this to me before, thinking about where that intersection lies and what sort of maybe risks or opportunities come up. Just wanted to give you the chance to reflect on that.
Yeah, thanks, Britta. Before that, even fundamentally, sometimes when we talk to SHAPE academics, going back to what Michaela said and your question about what is digital even a good idea to do as well or not? Sometimes it's just good to have kind of a talk or like a workshop or something to see if this is even available to them. So for example, how can digital work for you? What is actually digital? As in, I give an example, for example. So we're talking with a history lecturer, and then they created this very massive data. And by data, I mean actually data, Michaela, here, of, for example, very rich data of, I think it was about the religion and then how everything was ongoing there, but they were using open source, which is another discussion. But they really didn't think about commercialization. And then when they were talking about commercialization, we don't want to make any money. But it's not just about money; it's also a huge impact that you would have by making it even social enterprise or something like that. So even putting that option out there and knowing that it's there for SHAPE academics would help, because it's sometimes not known. But about the matching STEM and SHAPE academics, that I think that me and you talked about a lot, Britta, about this, and yeah, when I know computer scientists hang out with each other, and they don't necessarily are integrated in social sciences or any other SHAPE discipline. But often when, even back in our postdoc and PhD times, when we go out, they sometimes, for example, the statistical analysis that social scientists might use might really be similar to what computer scientists might use. So even that kind of being in the same room might actually be a catalyst for them to talk and then maybe have not necessarily a venture, but just a collaboration in even. So yeah, I'm hoping that I answer your question.
Thank you. So I think all of you have sort of touched on maybe the next point, which is some of the challenges or things that can go wrong along the way, or the flip side of that is what are the kind of, how do we mitigate those or step in and get them in advance? And, Michaela, you talked about the fact that this can be a long journey. It can take a while to get to that point, and you want to get in early and think about what that journey is that a shape researcher might go through when they're developing something that has potential for innovation. Sahand, you talk about, if people are using open source to develop, Bill, you talked about the fact that you coded something in Python that maybe isn't necessarily suitable for enterprise software, but you also talked about the fact that you needed to build a team and you needed to test with the market to figure out where to take this. So with that big preamble there, I wondered if you guys would maybe be willing to share with us maybe some of the other, what do we call them, pre-mortems or kind of issues to be aware of or challenges that you think might arise along the way, and any tips and considerations you have around those. And yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to jump in.
I can just jump in with a couple. I mean, we already mentioned also the time considerations. That's obviously a huge one. But I think also just the opportunities to develop necessary skills for this kind of thing. It is, I think I would say, particularly in shape disciplines, this is not really an avenue that is hardly ever on our radar. Certainly not through, in graduate school, and even in a kind of early career period, it's just not yet on the radar of shape disciplines. So it's difficult to find among colleagues, within the department, a venue for these kind of things. So, having the opportunity through, so Exeter Innovation, for example, runs an entrepreneurial researcher program, which is an internal, kind of small scale program like the ARC program, but on a much smaller scale. And that, it's just such a huge learning curve for a shape academic that, it's really important to have all of those kind of supporting structures of the TTO and, a business accelerator, probably several of them. So just, as much kind of supporting structure as possible is really important, to make up for the lack of skills that we might have.
I'd like to add on to that as well, because one thing I found, so I've worked in tech transfer for 13 years. Previous to working in startup spin-outs, I worked in consultancy. And one thing I saw is that a lot of the academics I work with in consultancy were, after say 5 years of doing their consultancy, looking to then spin out potentially, because they were able to validate what they were working on. They could see the demand. And a lot of them were then transitioning into trying to create their own entities to be able to grow that opportunity. It's great to do the consultancy through the university, but there is not as much chance to scale it up. So that was one thing I found really interesting as well. And it's not something we've seen across any other colleges, because it's harder for them to validate, because a lot of it's in the secret sauce, or there's IP or patents that they can't actually work with other people on. So one thing I would always encourage anyone within Shape that can potentially do consultancy, try and do as much of that as well. So you can get that, build up those customers, understand what you're doing, and it's low risk for yourself. You most likely will have people internally at your university who are able to support you. At Edinburgh, we do all of your contracts, your finance. You just get money into your salary every month on top of what you normally get. So there's normally low risk things you can do there to help. So you normally see people having an idea, you'll do some research, you have a research grant, you'll then potentially commercialize that through consultancy, then to potentially build relationships with another organization and do some industrial research, maybe not industrial in the standard term, but they bring in and get translational research and then opportunities to spin out afterwards. So it's a nice pathway that we just create more case studies to help other people understand that is an opportunity for success, and it is seen as success in an academic career as well. I think that's a really important thing for people like Bill in showing this great success that can happen.
Thank you, Michaela and Bill. Sahand, I know you had mentioned earlier when we were chatting that one of the things you find can be a barrier or a challenge is AI. And it's maybe an opportunity, it's maybe a challenge, AI, data, and open source. I wondered if you could share any kind of tips on helping academics who are getting into that space, particularly as it relates to SHAPE.
Yeah, I'm an optimist, Britta, so I see AI as an opportunity. I'm only optimist in terms of AI, I'd say. But so yeah, I think this is where SHAPE academics and STEM or computer scientist academics need to talk. This is not about the should we talk or not, but because of the inherent ethical conversation within AI, they just need to come together and then talk to each other. So I see it as an opportunity more than risk, but the risk would be if they are not talking to each other, I suppose. In terms of open source, I see open source as an opportunity because the open source itself is in my idea, is the best embodiment of open science. And most of academics that I know are going open source all the time, and for a good reason, because of the increased impact. Everyone can, the four freedoms that open source have: freedom to use, freedom to distribute, freedom to improve and redistribute as well. So it's just good for the impact academic world. So I think. And then the tools are available within those freedoms for SHAPE scientists to do. So, for example, they can use an open source tool for the data in history that I said, to visualize their data or just share their data for better impact and larger impact even as well. So I think I see both as an opportunity, but I might be too naive and too optimistic.
You're pretty well informed, yeah.
We have a group called Design Informatics at Edinburgh University, which is an interdisciplinary group between computer scientists and designers working to ensure that there is ethics built around AI, that it's inclusion, it's diversity, it's everyone's able to access different programs, and it's all around teaching computer scientists how to use social science to help inform their design structure, but also the creation and the ethical considerations around what they're doing. Because obviously there's a lot of bad press out there about how unethical potentially AI could be and the bias. So they used to say it's the last defense against the dark arts potentially, as social scientists helping. And we're really lucky to have a whole program called the BRAID program. So if anyone is interested in that, check it out, where we bring in externals, especially within the SHAPE areas and within more people who don't potentially standardly work in AI, to work with researchers, and it's fully funded as well. So that's a program that we have at the university, funded by Innovate, I believe, and they'll be doing a second call for researchers as well. But it's a great way to engage with industry. But social science and around that sort of area is a huge consideration that every company needs. We have huge demands of interest coming in from all range of sectors to work in that area. So do not hesitate to speak to those people. They want to hear from you. They probably just don't know where to start.
Thank you.
I will just add as well that even the funders are now including, for example, creative industries that Bill's talked about in Bridge AI, which is a massive grant from UKRI and Innovate UK. They included creative industries as well as all the classic STEM bases as well. So again, there's an opportunity there for SHAPE academics.
And I can see, so we've got a couple other folks that are popping some links to useful resources in the chat. Thank you, Kirsty, for sharing more on the iCure program that I think Bill mentioned he participated in. And thank you, Frank, for sharing about the digital SHAPE support that Sahand was mentioning, and a link to that as well. And Michaela, thank you for sharing the BRAID program. So we're coming up to the end of our session. We do have a few other questions that came through in the chat, but I am aware that we're going to need to wrap up so that people can get along with their day. I'm happy to stay on for a bit. I don't know if the panelists want to stick around for a few more minutes. We can cover a few more questions, but we will kind of formally close in just a moment so that people, if they need to, can leave. So I will formally thank you all panelists for joining us today. Really great to hear your stories and your experience. I mean, we could have been talking about this for ages longer, and we will stick around for a little bit longer in case there's a few questions that people wanted to ask before we log off for the day. Thank you also to everyone who's joining us from the UK and from overseas. Really great to see such a wide range of you here today. As Sahand mentioned, he's popped some more details in the chat as well about some ways in which we might be able to support you as well at Auxentia. Sahand leads our digital strategy for the company, but he also offers training around wider software commercialization. And in partnership with myself, we have some training and services around digital shape and shape commercialization more broadly. So we're happy to chat with any of you as well who might be interested in that. So with that, we'll draw it to a close right on the dot at 3:45 UK time. We will stick around just for a few more minutes. We'll just give it a slight pause in case people want to log off. We'll stick around for a few minutes and we'll try to answer a few more of those questions that are in the chat. So thank you, everybody. All right. So I think we had just a couple more questions kind of coming in the chat there. I think we had one early on for you, Bill, but I think you sort of talked to it in the question. I think it was from Alex around how you and when you realized your innovation might have the potential for commercialization. I think you responded saying it was through your market validation activity. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, a couple things. So, I mean, in the first instance, conversations with lots of different people around, and people in the initially just saying, "Oh, that sounds really interesting. We could use that in such and such." So a recognition. I guess that's a kind of a market validation, certainly within the kind of market of academia itself, right? I have a use for this in my research, but other researchers might also find it useful. For their own in their own research. The other thing was the on Exeter's internal entrepreneurial researcher program. So we had to undertake a market validation exercise, which meant engaging with industry stakeholders. So I remember I had a conversation with the sort of the CTO of JSTOR and somebody at LexisNexis, so not exactly shopping the idea around, but trying to get a view of the landscape and, would different areas of industry find something like this potentially useful? And that did confirm the utility of this thing in some form for a broader audience. So I think that kind of market validation, market validation activity was great as an initial catalyst again for the project.
It is wild how quickly you can kind of get those answers, taking that sort of entrepreneurial approach. Then Michaela mentioned the lean canvas being another tool that we can use when we're trying to figure out, does somebody want this? But then you go out and you have the conversation and how quickly you can get those insights.
People are also willing to talk to you as well when you're from a university.
Yes.
I think if you're talking about it being part of your research, they're not selling something to them. That's a much easier way to get in and have those conversations as well. So don't be scared. You're not going in to sell my product. You're going in to ask them about an idea and get feedback. And people love to talk. So if you ask them a question, they're going to talk back. So that's a great way. And so nerves are the biggest issue, quite honestly.
Yeah, thank you. One more question. I think this is the only one we didn't get to from Janeet about who are the catalysts within your university for shape commercialization. And what they mean is who, in your view, are the greatest supporters of shape commercialization within your university? Who are the individuals or the groups that catalyze this and move this along? And I imagine you all, Sahand, Michaela, and Bill will all have different kind of answers. So anybody want to jump in there? Maybe they'll be the same. We'll see.
I would say you really need academic champions. We can talk tech transfer until you're blue in the face, but until you have one person who's been there, done that, and can show a case study, but also somebody you can pass them to and say, this is my job, but like I know you want to talk to somebody who's been there, done that. It's really hard to actually get it moving. So we actually brought in consultants who have actually done it before to come and do talks to our academics to help them understand it as well, to show that this isn't something completely beyond the realm of expectation within academia. You can do this, and here's somebody who's done it successfully. And it was a social enterprise as well, so it's understanding what is success in your university. And we did a poll with I think it was around 104 academics, and 74% of them were really interested in social enterprises. So that's been an area that we have focused on, because it seems that's more of an interest in a standard company. So that was something that we decided to sort of focus on. But since we didn't have that much internally, we went external, and the output of that has been great. We've now got a really strong pipeline with 3 startups or 3 spin-outs. They're all social enterprises within the college now, which has been great within the last 3 years.
Thanks, Michaela.
I definitely agree with Michaela as well. So academics like Bill, if even in STEM, the catalysts are, I would say, more academics that have done it before and then they're successful. Even sharing their challenges as well, they're great, and then had their roots like what Bill did today, pretty much. For other catalysts as well, at tech transfer offices and everything as well. I think just knowing that there's a support, that's great for Shape Academics. That's it.
So I think we've covered all of the questions in the Q&A. There's no need to stay on unless we all want to stick around and chat. But thanks again. Now is the unofficial close. Thank you again, everybody, for joining, Michaela, Bill, and Sahand. Great to hear from you all today. We'll have a recording and be able to circulate. Possibly, I'm not sure if there's going to be a recording that gets circulated or something else after this, but I'm sure we'll be following up with everybody who registered today. And you can keep in touch with us through the email address that Frank shared earlier, info@auxentia.com, or otherwise we will be in touch with a follow-up email. So thanks everybody again, and have a great evening if you're in the UK, great morning if you're in the US or elsewhere, and we'll hopefully see you all again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Britta.
Bye now. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.